Hello, Anatomy Physiology, and welcome to day 80. So we're turning in our warm-ups today, so make sure you get these in here. They're on the board here, on the screen here, and then we'll move on from here. So pause today for a moment of silence, and then continue on with our warm-up questions. Again, if you want to pause the video, you can look at those, or you can look at them on the slideshow. So moving past that. So class business, we were trying to figure out kind of scheduling. So I ended up splitting reproductive system into 2 days. So we'll have reproductive system kind of day 1, reproductive system kind of day 2. So that'll be days 80 and 81. So we're on day 80 today. So the way it's going to split is today, day 80, we'll talk about just kind of overview of the systems, male systems, female system, and then mammary glands. And then day 2, we'll talk about the menstrual cycle, pregnancy, and developmental aspects. So it was just a little bit too much to try to wrap up into one day there. So calendar-wise, this is kind of the best of what I understand in terms of where the calendar is looking. So we're day 80 here, or day 80 here. That's our blue day and our gold day. That's May 15th, May 18th. So it'll be reproductive system day 1. We'll have reproductive system day 2 on day 81. As I mentioned before, we're not going to have a Unit 7 unit test. That's just going to get wrapped into the final. So we're going to start reviewing for the final, day 82. So it'll be review day number 1. There's no school on May 25th. And then we'll have review day number 2 on day 83. From what I understand, there's some talk of doing something for Royal Day for the school, but I don't know exactly what that is. But then May 29th, we're going to move into the finals. So the first 2 finals will be social studies and foreign language on the 29th. And then June 1st will be English and science. So we're looking at June 1st for the science final day. And I'll have more information on the specifics of that as it comes out there. Conflict exams, I don't know what that's going to look like, but that's what's listed on the calendar still for June 2nd, June 3rd, math and religion. And then I don't know how it's going to work, but on the calendar still is baccalaureate and graduation for the 4th, and that's the 5th on there. So I think that information will come out soon, and we'll kind of know what to expect on those. But that's kind of the calendar for the rest of the month and into June there. Okay, so things that we're looking at. So MyLab and Mastering Chapter 14 and 15 are on Canvas or the alternate text assignment. Today on day 80, we'll start posting the MyLab and Mastering for Chapter 16. Make sure you pay attention to the due dates on those. Then we've got Lab 26, and then Lab 27 is what we're looking at today with the anatomy of the reproductive system. And then online tests for Unit 6, make sure you're doing that similar to the Unit 5 online tests to get those in. Let me know if you have any questions. And then get another view of homework 25, 26, 27, and then 14, 15, 16 is what we're looking at there. So our objectives for the lab today: identify structures of the male reproductive system on an appropriate model or diagram, give the function of each, trace the pathway of sperm from the testes to the external environment, name the exocrine and endocrine products of the testes, relate sperm structure to sperm function, identify the structure of the female reproductive system when provided with an appropriate model, diagram, and explain the function of each, identify the fundus, body, and cervix region of the uterus, name the exocrine and endocrine products of the ovary. So we'll hit some of these today and some of these tomorrow. The objective, the activities they've got, identifying male reproductive organs. There's a figure in the lab that works pretty good. It's figure 27.1. Viewing sperm microscopically. We'll look at that on day 81 when we kind of get to that part of it. Pregnancy and kind of that's where the sperm part will come in. And identifying female reproductive organs. Should be a figure in the lab manual for that as well as conducting the microscopic study of the ovary. I'll show you that more of that on day 81 there. Okay, so today's notes, as I mentioned, I split it into a couple different spots, a couple different screencasts. We're going to split it into 3 parts. So part 1 is going to be an overview of male and female reproductive anatomy and functions, as well as mammary glands. And then I only expect you to know the material that's listed in part 1 here. Parts 2 and 3 are provided as kind of additional information. So it's going to focus, part 2 will focus on male anatomy. and functions, and part 3 will focus on female anatomy and functions. The parts that are relevant from that in terms of kind of what I want you to know are in part 1, or they will be on tomorrow, next day's notes, day 81, in terms of pregnancy and so on. So that's kind of what we're looking at on those there. Okay, so let's move into part 1, reproductive systems overview. Okay, so what is the reproductive system all about? So it's designed to produce gametes and contribute to the development of secondary sexual characteristics. How does it do this? So males produce sperm, females produce eggs, and when they join together, a zygote and then ultimately an embryo is formed. And why do we do this? Is so that we can ensure the survival of the species. All species do this, so that they can perpetuate life into the next generation. Okay. All right, so reproductive system, what are we looking at? So gonads are our primary sexual organs. So in males, they're known as the testes, and in females, they're known as the ovaries. The gonads produce the gametes, which are the sex cells, and they secrete hormones. So particularly, we get sperm, which are our male gametes, and ova or eggs, which are for female gametes. And then gametes normally are a condition what we call haploid, meaning that they have half the number of chromosomes a normal cell does. So they've got 23 chromosomes as opposed to the 46 found in most other cells there. So these gametes, when they combine, they form something called a zygote, which is the beginning of the next generation. Okay, so here's just kind of a visual of this. So these individuals, they're adults. They're what we call 2N. They've got 46 chromosomes, 2 complete sets of chromosomes. The process of making gametes is known as meiosis. So in males, we produce sperm that have got 1N or 23 chromosomes. Females produce eggs that are 1N or 23 chromosomes, and then fertilization, we're back to 2N or 46 chromosomes. And then we mitotically divide until we're back to full adult-sized organisms there. Okay. So overview of just kind of male systems. So I do expect you to understand these major structures, right? So testes, what are its structures? Duct system, what is its structures? Accessory organs, what are those structures? External genitalia, what are those structures? And then how do those particular structures, right, achieve the listed functions? So how do seminiferous tubules work in the formation of sperm? That's kind of something we want to pay attention to. And then how do the sperm maturation and sperm transport routes, how does that happen in here, and so on. So we'll look at some pictures here as we go through the male reproductive system relatively quick. So the chief roles in the male reproductive system, again, is produce sperm. This is a process called spermatogenesis. So formation begins in a region of the testes known as seminiferous tubules, and then immature sperm will mature in an area called the epididymis. And then during ejaculation, sperm are propelled to something called the ductus deferens, sometimes known as the vas deferens, and then eventually through the urethra and exit the body. This entire process takes somewhere between 64 and 72 days before the sperm are fully considered to be mature and ready for ejaculation. And this is other thing that happens in male bodies. We produce a hormone called testosterone. It's produced in the interstitial cells and the seminiferous tubules of the testes. Male hormones in general are known as androgens, and testosterone being the most prevalent androgen. Okay, so looking kind of visually, so here is our testes with the epididymis on the outside. The testes and the epididymis are connected through the vas deferens. There's also some blood vessels in there. And all of that is housed within the scrotal sac there, which is exterior to the abdominal cavity. And then that vas deferens comes up over the top of the pubic bone, and then over the top of the bladder. So this is the bladder behind here where the ureter is going up to the kidneys, over the top of the bladder, and then down to and connects to something called the ejaculatory duct, which is located adjacent to the seminal vesicles. And that joins up. So this is one side, and this is the other one that joins up. It connects through, and this particular region here is called the prostatic urethra. So this is the urethra from the bladder. It's going to come out here and join in there. And so the sperm would travel the route through here to the prostatic urethra, and then into the membranous urethra, which is right here. That kind of exits the abdominal cavity, and then into this, which is called the spongy urethra, which runs the length of the penis on out. Other things that it's going to pass through is this whole area right here is called the prostate, And then this right here is the bulbourethral gland, and this is all just anterior of the rectum and anus right there. So that kind of is a good overview of that part of it. Okay, so looking inside the testes, we can see the seminiferous tubules. So they're these tightly coiled, just little passageways here, and they kind of wind all around. There's this area called the rete testes, and then it wraps into the epididymis, which is this structure that kind of goes all around the outside of the testes right there. It wraps all the way down and then all the way back up, and you can see it travels further up there. So that's the ductus deferens at that point, with the blood vessels and nerves running down to that whole particular area there. And then it's worth noting that there's two testes, a right and a left testicle, and the scrotal sac is actually itself split down the middle. So there's a septum like we have in the heart that split the right side and left side of the heart. So there's a septum that separates the right pocket where the right testes is held from the left pocket where the left testes is held. So they're actually separated inside there. They can't get wrapped around and knotted together because of the septum in between there. So if we look top view, again, you can kind of see the same thing. Testes, epididymis, ductus deferens, again, coming up and over the seminiferous vesicles here, down through the prostate, and then all the way out through the spongy urethra, out to the external urethral orifice, sometimes known as the meatus, M-E-A-T-U-S there. And then, can't think of anything else we can look at that. So other things we can kind of pay attention to is we've got, as far as the penis, there's what's known as the root of the penis and the shaft of the penis. They're kind of, this part extends externally and this part is all held internally on there. Okay. So female reproductive anatomy, if we want to look at that, just kind of overview. So ovaries, we'll get into kind of a lot on the ovaries next time, but the major function of the ovaries is to house and mature eggs, which are called oocytes. And then there's what's known as the duct system. And so this is a series of tubes. So the mature oocyte leaves the ovary, goes through the uterine, the fallopian tubes, to the uterus and eventually the vagina. And then this all transports the oocyte, and then in the uterus we house and nurture the developing embryo. External genitalia that we'll see is the vulva, kind of constitutes the major organs of copulation. Again, kind of major structures and how they achieve them. So again, what we're looking at is we're producing eggs and preparing the body for developing embryo. This is known as oogenesis. We pronounce both O's on there, so oogenesis. The total supply of eggs that a woman has is determined by the time that she's born, and then that as she begins her menstrual cycle with the onset of puberty, then one egg typically per month will mature and be ovulated, sometimes two, and that can potentially result in twins. And that the onset of the menstrual cycle is known as menarche, and then when the reproductive ability ends, it's known as menopause. So we're producing hormones just like we had in males. We'll produce female hormones, estrogens and progesterone. In the ovaries, estrogen is produced in something called the follicle cells, and progesterone is produced in something called the corpus luteum. These generally are just going to fall into the category of estrogens, or the known title for female hormones on there. Okay, so female anatomy. So we can start off with the ovary. So the ovary is, there's a right and a left ovary. They're inside the abdominal cavity. And then this is the fallopian tube, which kind of comes up over here, or the uterine tube. And then it's going to come in and connect to the uterus. Now the uterus kind of has, sometimes described as an upside down pear. So kind of the back end of it, the largest end of it, is known as the fundus. The middle part of it is known as the body. And then there's a small segment that can protrude down into the vagina, and that's known as the cervix. And there's an opening here so that sperm can potentially travel up through that opening of the cervix into the uterus and then into one of those uterine tubes. And then if a baby develops, it can come back out the other way, come back out through the uterus, and then out through the vagina that way. So other things that we can look at on here is we have the cervix, we have the vagina. There's potentially a hymen, which is a small layer of tissue that stretches across there. All female bodies start with that, and then it's not always a complete closing across there, but can be partial. And then outside of that, we have what's called the labia. So there's the labia minus or labia minora, and then the labia majora on the outside is that. And then in the anterior end, we have the clitoris, which is erectile tissue, somewhat similar to the erectile tissue of the penis on males. And we'll kind of get into some other parts. So other external views here. So again, we have the vaginal opening. This is the urethral opening right there, and then the clitoris at the top. Labia majora on the outside, labia minora on the inside. You can see this opening, kind of this triangle area here is known as the vestibule. That's just kind of this area that's the opening part of between the labia minora. If we go on to the next slide, so we're looking kind of inside here. So we've got the uterus here, we've got the uterine tubes here, or the fallopian tubes here, ovaries one off to either side, and that's kind of all held in place by what we call these broad ligaments, and that kind of keeps everything from moving around. But again, you can see highly vascularized, lots of nerve endings that go into that whole area there, and then trying to think of anything else we can look at. So we have the cervix, cervical canal, vagina, round ligament, broad ligament, and then we'll get into, when we talk about pregnancy, the kind of more the parts of the uterus, and we'll talk about the different layers of the wall, the endometrium, myometrium, and perimetrium. But the big one is the endometrium layer that's on the inside there. Okay. So just kind of a quick word again on ovaries. So each ovary houses ovarian, what we call follicles. They consist of the oocytes, which are the immature eggs, and then follicle cells, which are these different layers of different cells that surround the oocyte and promote maturation of the ovaries there, of the follicles. In this image, we can see a primary follicle kind of as it grows. This would be across like a monthly cycle. I don't believe they actually move like this throughout the uterus. I believe they stay in one spot and then they just kind of grow and develop within that one spot. So they would grow, and then at some point they would mature, and what's known as the secondary oocyte would actually come out of that through the process of ovulation, and then go into the fallopian tubes or the uterine tubes and then travel down to the uterus. This ruptured follicle will then develop into what's called the corpus luteum. It will slowly degenerate until it disappears on there. Okay, so other thing we want to look at are mammary glands. So mammary glands are present in both sexes, both males and females, but they really only function in females. Mammary glands are modified sweat glands, and their function is to produce milk to nourish newborns. So this is stimulated by sex hormones, mostly estrogens, to increase the size of the mammary glands. And then if we look at the parts of the mammary glands, we'll see the image on the next slide here. There's the areola, which is a central pigmented area, the nipple, the protruding area, lobes, which are internal structures, and they radiate around the nipple, lobules, which are located within each lobe and contain clusters of alveolar glands, and the alveolar glands are the ones that actually produce milk when lactating. And it says when a woman is lactating, but if you have any body, a male body or a female body, and you give them enough estrogen, they actually will produce milk. So there are situations where people who are anatomically male will actually have a high enough estrogen level that they'll actually produce milk on their own. Then there's lactiferous ducts, which connect the alveolar glands to the nipples, and the lactiferous sinuses, which is the dilated portion where milk accumulates on there. So visually, if we're looking at here, so here's the nipple, here's the areola around the outside. These are the lobes kind of going inside there, this particular branch. There can be adipose tissue kind of scattered around and throughout that. And then you can see the lactiferous duct, which is this part here, and the lactiferous sinus, which is this part here. And then each one of these is the lobule containing the alveoli. And again, remember the alveoli are the part that actually creates the milk or produces the milk, secretes the milk, that will then travel into those ducts, into those sinuses, to be stored before being extruded there. Okay, so kind of another side view on that. So you can see where everything sits on the breast tissue, the mammary gland tissue there. So, all right, and I think, yeah, last little bit here. So one of the things that people do is they do what's called a mammography. They try to detect breast cancers that are too small to see. This recommendation on here is from a couple years old. I believe it's changed, so I don't know what the new recommendations are. I should look that up, but I don't know what that is. It's often signaled by a change in skin texture, puckering or leaking from the nipple, or lumps in the breast there. So typically what they'll do is they will do a mammography where they actually put the breast tissue in, and then they'll take an x-ray of it to try to detect areas that are particularly dense tissue there. Okay. All right, so that was a lot. So that wraps up part 1 of day 1. Next time on day 81, we'll look at reproductive system, menstrual cycle, pregnancy, and developing aspects. I'm going to go ahead and make the next 2 screencasts focusing on the male reproductive system and on the female reproductive system. But today, if you want to just listen to part 1, you can just listen to part 1. I think that's good. All right, so that was a longer one, but thank you very much for listening. All right.